The Hurtgen forest had devoured men for months. Now, in February 1945, it held only ghosts and snow. Sergeant Jack Turner pulled his collar tighter against the wind that cut through the pines like artillery shrapnel. Behind him, 9 men from Fox Company's 2nd Platoon moved in a ragged line, their boots crunching through ice-crusted snow that had turned from white to gray over the long winter. Contact. 200 yards, whispered Private Dennis Walsh from the point position. His breath formed small clouds that vanished instantly in the frozen air. Jack raised his fist. The column stopped. They'd been tracking what intelligence said was a retreating Wehrmacht supply unit, but intelligence had been wrong before. Dead wrong. Through the trees came a sound that didn't belong to war, a woman's voice, weak and pleading in German. Then silence. Then another cry, younger this time. Corporal Raymond Fletcher moved up beside Jack. Could be a trap, Sarge. They've used civilians before. Jack knew this. Everyone knew this. The war had taught them to trust nothing, especially not sounds of suffering. Suffering was the forest's native language now. But something in that second cry, the raw terror of it, pulled at a part of Jack he'd thought frozen solid months ago. Walsh, Mitchell with me. Fletcher, position the squad for covering fire. If this goes bad, light up anything that moves. They advanced through a grove of shattered birch trees. The artillery had been through here recently. The trunks were splintered at chest height, their white bark stained with sap that had frozen into amber tears. The clearing appeared suddenly, as clearings did in this forest. At its center lay the ruins of what had been a civilian wagon overturned, one wheel still spinning slowly. Around it, scattered possessions told a story. A child's wooden horse, a photograph of a man in Wehrmacht uniform, a medical bag with its contents spilled across the snow. 3 women huddled against the wagon's far side. The nearest was maybe 40, her face gray with shock and blood loss. A tourniquet had been improvised around her left thigh using a belt and a stick. Beside her, a girl of perhaps 17 held a younger woman who couldn't have been more than 25. Both were shaking violently. The older woman looked up at Jack's approach. Her eyes held no hope, only a kind of terrible acceptance. She spoke in German, then switched to broken English. Please. Shoot fast. Not the young ones first. Me first. The words hit Jack harder than he expected. He'd seen a lot of death, but he'd never seen someone beg for it with that kind of exhausted dignity. Ma'am, we're not going to shoot you. He lowered his rifle slowly, aware that Walsh and Mitchell still had theirs up. Private Mitchell, get that medical kit over here. Walsh, check the perimeter. The older woman stared at him as if he'd spoken a language she couldn't comprehend. You are American? Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Jack Turner, 2nd Battalion, 11th Infantry Regiment. She looked at the other 2 women, then back at Jack. Something shifted in her expression, not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of understanding that she might not die in the next 10 seconds. I am Helene Richter, nurse. This is Marta Schneider. She is hurt bad the leg, bleeding inside maybe. And Liese Hartmann. She is only 17. The planes came, then soldiers, ours, they ran. They left us. Mitchell knelt beside Marta, his hands surprisingly gentle as he checked her pulse. Pulse is thready, Sarge. She's lost a lot of blood. This tourniquet probably saved her life, but she needs a real hospital. Jack looked at the 3 women, then at the forest around them. The tactical situation was garbage. They were 6 miles from friendly lines. In territory the Germans still contested. Command had been clear. Scout, report, engage only if necessary. Bringing wounded German civilians back was nowhere in the mission parameters. Fletcher appeared at his elbow. Sarge, we got movement. East side, maybe half a mile out. Could be their rear guard. The decision point. Leave them and complete the mission. Or, Helene was watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She knew what he was calculating. She'd probably made similar calculations herself, countless times, when resources were scarce and choices were brutal. Jack Turner had been raised in a small town in Pennsylvania, where people helped their neighbors. That world seemed impossibly distant now, separated from this frozen forest by an ocean and 1,000 deaths. But some part of it still lived in him, stubborn as a winter weed. "You're coming with me," he said. The words came out flat, matter of fact. "All three of you. We'll get you back to our medical station." Helene's eyes widened. "But we are German." "Yeah, I noticed." Jack turned to Fletcher. "Get me Porter and Williams. We're going to need a litter for Mrs. Schneider. The other two can walk if we go slow." Fletcher didn't move immediately. "Jack, this could blow the mission. Command's going to. Command can court-martial me later. Right now, these women need help and we're the only ones here who can give it. Unless you want to explain to your mother someday why you left 3 wounded women to freeze to death in the woods." It was a low blow, and Jack knew it. Fletcher's mother had died when he was 12, and he talked about her sometimes in the late watches. But it worked. "Yeah, all right. But when the old man starts yelling, you're taking the hit, not me. Deal." They moved in a formation Jack had never used before. 4 men at the cardinal points, 2 on the litter carrying Marta, 1 helping Liese who couldn't stop trembling, and 2 ranging ahead. It was slow, inefficient, and probably against every tactical doctrine the army had ever written. The snow had started again, light flakes that stuck to their uniforms and reduced visibility to maybe 50 yards. In the Hurtgen, reduced visibility could mean death. You couldn't see enemy positions until you walked into their kill zones. Helene walked beside Jack, one arm supporting Liese. Despite her own injuries, Jack could see she favored her left side where her coat was torn and blood had soaked through. She maintained a steady pace. "Why you do this?" she asked after they'd gone maybe half a mile. Jack considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. "Because my lieutenant once told me that how we fight says more about who we are than who we're fighting against. Because I'm tired of death. Because those women looked at me like I was already a monster and I needed to prove I wasn't. At least to myself. Because it's the right thing to do," he said instead. Helene made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so bitter. The right thing. In this war, who knows what is right? I know leaving wounded people to die isn't right. That's enough for now. They walked in silence for a while. Behind them, Marta groaned softly with each jarring step the litter-bearers took. There was no good way to carry someone through a forest in winter. Every root and depression became an obstacle. Private Daniel Porter, who'd been ranging ahead, appeared suddenly from behind a snow-covered boulder. "Sarge, we got a problem. There's a bridge up ahead, only crossing point for the next 2 miles. But there's tracks, fresh ones, maybe an hour old." Jack moved forward to look. The bridge was a simple wooden structure spanning a half-frozen stream. The tracks were unmistakable. Boots, multiple sets, heading in both directions. "Could be ours," Walsh suggested without much conviction. "Could be. More likely it's not." Jack studied the terrain. The stream was maybe 15 feet across. In summer, they could wade it. In February, with the temperature well below freezing, going in that water was a death sentence. Helene came up beside him. "There is another way. Maybe. I grew up near here, before the war. There was a logging road, very old. If it still exists. How far? 2 kilometers north. But I am not sure it is still there. The army, they cut many trees, changed everything." Jack looked at his squad. They were exhausted, cold, and carrying wounded. 2 more kilometers in the wrong direction could be disastrous. But the bridge was a natural ambush point, and those tracks suggested it was being watched. "Show me," he said. They turned north, leaving the bridge behind. The detour added time they didn't have and energy they couldn't spare. Williams, carrying the rear of Marta's litter, stumbled and nearly went down. Mitchell caught him, but the litter lurched violently. Marta's scream was brief but sharp. "Easy," Jack called back. "We're no good to anyone if we kill ourselves getting there." The logging road, when they found it, was barely recognizable, more of a gap between trees than an actual road. But it led down to the stream at a point where massive boulders created a kind of natural stepping stone crossing. "I came here as a girl," Helene said softly. My father, he worked in the sawmill. We would picnic here in summer. The memory seemed to pain her more than her injuries. Jack understood. The world before the war, the picnics, the sawmills, the normal life was a ghost that haunted all of them. Can we get the litter across? I think yes. If we are careful. Careful was a relative term when you were balancing on ice-slicked rocks carrying a wounded woman. It took them 20 minutes to get everyone across, moving one at a time, testing each step. Walsh went in up to his knee when a rock shifted unexpectedly, but Porter hauled him out before the cold could do serious damage. On the far side, Jack let them rest for 5 minutes. They shared what rations they had. Williams produced a chocolate bar and broke it into pieces so small they were more symbolic than nutritious. He gave the first piece to Liese, who stared at it like she'd forgotten food could still exist. Helene used the break to check Marta's wounds. Her face grew tighter as she worked. The bleeding is worse. Internal, I think. She needs surgery soon, or... She didn't finish the sentence. How soon? Hours. Maybe less. Jack checked his map. They were still 3 miles from the medical station, and that was assuming they could travel in a straight line, which they couldn't. The terrain was too rough, and the enemy presence too uncertain. We'll move faster, he said, knowing it was easier said than done. Mitchell appeared at his shoulder. Sarge, I don't mean to second guess, but maybe we should think about leaving some of our gear. We could move quicker with less weight. It was the kind of practical suggestion that could save lives. It was also exactly the kind of suggestion that could cost you everything if you encountered the enemy with reduced ammunition and no rations. Jack looked at his squad. They were good men. He trusted them with his life. But trust didn't stop bullets, and good intentions didn't win firefights. We keep the weapons and ammunition. Everything else, if you can spare it, lose it. The next 10 minutes saw a strange transformation. Men who'd carried family photos for thousands of miles across Europe left them under trees. Lucky socks went into the snow. A pack of cards, a harmonica, personal items that had survived artillery barrages and machine gun fire were abandoned in a frozen forest so that 3 German women might have a chance to live. When they started moving again, they were lighter, not much faster. Marta's condition made speed impossible, but lighter in a way that felt right. The German soldiers came out of the white stillness like wolves materializing from winter air. One moment the forest was empty except for snow and shadows. The next, there were 9 of them, wearing mismatched uniforms and carrying weapons that ranged from proper rifles to hunting shotguns. Volkssturm, Jack realized immediately. The People's Militia boys and old men pressed into service because the real army was dead or retreating, which made them more dangerous in some ways, because they were unpredictable and often desperate. The youngest couldn't have been more than 16, his face still smooth under a helmet that was too large for his head. The oldest was gray-haired and gaunt, his hands shaking from more than just the cold. Their leader, if you could call him that, was a thin man in his 40s, wearing a Wehrmacht corporal's insignia that looked like it had been sewn onto his coat recently. "Halt!" he shouted in German, then repeated it in accented English. "You are American soldiers. These women are German citizens. They come with us." Jack's squad had already formed a defensive perimeter, weapons up. The Volkssturm matched them, creating a tableau of mutual targeting that could turn lethal in seconds. "These women are wounded," Jack called back. "We're taking them to a medical facility. You want them to die out here?" The corporal's face twisted. "You take them to become prisoners, to be interrogated, used. We take them home. To German doctors." It would have been a reasonable argument if there were any German doctors left within 20 miles, or if home was anything more than the rubble of defeated villages. But Jack could see the man believed it, or needed to believe it. "There are no German doctors," Helene said suddenly, her voice carrying clearly through the cold air. She stepped forward, out of the protective circle of American soldiers. "I am a nurse, I know. The hospitals are destroyed. The doctors are gone or dead. These Americans, they saved us. They gave us food. They carried us when we could not walk." The young soldier, the 16-year-old, looked uncertain. His rifle wavered slightly. "She is confused," the corporal said. "From her wounds. Germans belong with Germans. This is proper. This is how it must be." "Proper," Helene repeated, and Jack heard a lifetime of bitterness compress into those two syllables. Was it proper when the planes bombed the refugee column? When soldiers ran away and left us bleeding? When? Enough! The corporal's shout echoed off the trees. His rifle came up, aimed at Helene. "You will be silent. You will come with us. All of you. Now." The situation balanced on the edge of violence. Jack could feel his finger on the trigger, knew his squad had the same readiness, 9 against 9, at close range. Nobody would win that fight. Everybody would lose. Then Liese did something unexpected. She walked out to stand beside Helene, moving slowly like she was afraid any sudden movement would shatter the frozen moment. She was crying, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. "Please," she said in German, then switched to English. "Please. No more shooting. No more dying. I am so tired of dying." The young soldier lowered his rifle. Not much, just an inch or two. But in that small movement, Jack saw an opening. "Nobody needs to die here," he said, keeping his voice level. "You can see these women are hurt. We have medical supplies, doctors. Let us help them. When the war is over, and it will be over soon, they'll be alive. Isn't that what matters? When the war is over, Germany will have won," the corporal said. But there was no conviction in it anymore. He was repeating words, filling the silence with the official line. The old man in the Volkssturm group lowered his hunting rifle. "Karl," he said to the corporal, "the girl is right. Enough dying." "Traitor," the corporal spat, but he was losing control and everyone could sense it. Not a traitor, just tired. So tired. The old man looked at Jack. "You promise you help them?" "Truly?" "I promise." "Then take them. We will report they escaped, or were killed. Something." He turned to the corporal. "Come. This is not worth our lives. Not anymore." For a terrible moment, Jack thought the corporal would start shooting anyway, would choose death over the admission that everything he believed in was collapsing. But the man just stood there, his rifle still up but his eyes empty. And then finally he lowered it. "Go," he said to Jack. "Before I change my mind, before any of us change our minds." The Volkssturm melted back into the forest. The young soldier was the last to leave, looking back once at Liese with an expression Jack couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or relief, or just the exhausted confusion of a child in a uniform he never should have worn. When they were gone, Fletcher let out a breath that steamed in the cold air. That was close. Too close. Yeah. Jack looked at Helene. "You shouldn't have done that. Stepped out like that. Could have gotten yourself killed. If they wanted to kill me, I would be dead already. I needed them to see, to understand." She trailed off, swaying slightly. Jack caught her arm. "You're hurt worse than you're letting on, aren't you? Ribs, I think. Broken. It is not important now. Everything's important now. Mitchell, check her out." While Mitchell examined Helene's injuries, 3 broken ribs, confirming her assessment, plus extensive bruising. Jack considered the map again. The encounter had cost them time and rattled nerves. They needed to move, but Marta was fading, and now Helene was barely keeping herself upright. Porter came back from a quick scout. "Path ahead looks clear. No more tracks. I think we're in the free zone now, Sarge. Another mile, maybe less. 1 mile. It might as well have been 100. But they'd come this far. All right. Let's move. Slow and steady. We stop for nothing unless we have to." They lifted the litter. Liese took Helene's arm. The squad formed up around them, and they headed into the darkening forest. The 47th Field Hospital was a collection of tents and commandeered buildings that huddled in what had once been a small German farming village. Now it was part of the vast American logistics network that stretched back across the Rhine, a temporary city of wounded men and exhausted medical personnel. Captain Robert Hayes, the chief medical officer, was in the middle of amputating a soldier's frostbitten foot when someone told him Americans had brought in German civilians. His first reaction was disbelief. His second was anger. By the time he finished the amputation and scrubbed down, that anger had built into something approaching fury. He found Jack Turner in the waiting area, sitting on a bench with his head in his hands. "Sergeant Turner?" Jack looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face gray with exhaustion. "Sir, would you like to explain to me why I have 3 German nationals in my medical facility?" Jack stood, swaying slightly. "They were wounded, sir. We found them in the forest. They needed help. So do 10,000 other people in this country. So do our own men. I've got 60 wounded Americans in there, Sergeant. 60 boys who are waiting for supplies, for blood, for time I don't have. And you bring me German civilians?" It was a fair point. Jack had known it would be a fair point. "Yes, sir. I do." "On whose authority?" "Mine, sir." Hayes stared at him. The captain was a good man, Jack had heard, a skilled surgeon who'd saved countless lives. But good men could still be ground down by war's arithmetic, the brutal calculus of who lives and who dies when resources are limited. "You understand you may have just killed an American soldier," Hayes said quietly. "That blood I use on your Germans, that's blood I can't use on Private Johnson from Kansas or Corporal Martinez from Texas. Those bandages, those medications, all finite, all allocated. And you've just reallocated them." The words hit Jack like punches. He hadn't thought about it that way. Or maybe he had and just hadn't wanted to face it. "Sir, I don't." Hayes held up a hand. "Don't justify it. Don't explain. You made your choice. Now I have to make mine. And because I'm a doctor, and I took an oath to help the sick and injured regardless of who they are, I'm going to treat those women. But I want you to understand the cost. Someone else might pay it, but there's always a cost." "Yes, sir. I understand." Hayes studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Maybe you do. Get yourself to the mess tent. You look like death warmed over. The women, will they be all right? The older one, Helene? She'll be fine. Broken ribs, some lacerations. Painful but not life-threatening. The girl, Liese, severe shock, malnutrition. But she's young and strong. She'll recover." Hayes paused. "The other one, Marta Schneider. I won't lie to you, Sergeant. It's bad. We're operating now. But she's lost a lot of blood, and there's internal damage. It's 50-50 at best. 50-50. Half a chance. Better than the 0 chance she'd had in that forest. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if she lives. Now get out of here. You're bleeding on my floor." Jack looked down. His left arm, which he'd thought was just bruised from the river crossing, was actually cut a deep gash across his forearm that had soaked through his sleeve. He hadn't even noticed. "I'll have someone look at that," Hayes said, his voice slightly softer. "But after we're done with the surgeries, priority, remember?" "I remember." They put Jack in a corner bed in the recovery tent, while a medic, named Stevens, stitched his arm. 15 stitches, neat and tight. Stevens had been a tailor before the war, and it showed in his work. Across the tent, Helene lay in another bed, her ribs wrapped and her breathing shallow but steady. Liese sat beside her, holding her hand. Someone had given the girl clean clothes and hot soup, and though she still looked haunted, the violent trembling had stopped. It was late evening now. Outside, snow fell in heavy sheets. Inside, oil lamps cast shadows that moved like living things across the canvas walls. "She's sleeping," Liese said, nodding toward Helene. "First time in days, maybe." The pain medicine helped. Jack nodded. His own arm throbbed despite the morphine Stevens had given him. "What about you? You should be sleeping too." "I am afraid to sleep. When I sleep, I dream about the planes. The way they sounded before the bombs came. Jack knew about that. Every soldier knew about that. The nightmares that came when you closed your eyes. The memories that were worse than waking reality. "How did you end up in that forest?" he asked. Liese's hand tightened on Helene's. "We were leaving. My family, Helene, Marta, and her baby. The whole village was leaving. The Russians were coming from the east, everyone said. We had to go west, to surrender to the Americans. Russians are. She shivered. Bad things happen with Russians. Where's your family now? Gone. The first attack, it separated us. My mother, my little brother, they were in the front of the column. I was in back with Helene and Marta. Then the planes came again and, I don't know where they are. The simple tragedy of it, a family scattered, a girl left alone in a war zone, was almost too much. Jack had seen so much suffering that he'd thought himself numb to it. But something about Liese's quiet acceptance broke through his armor. We have people who track refugees, he said. Red Cross, civilian affairs. I can ask them to. You have done enough. Liese looked at him with eyes that seemed too old for her face. More than enough. You saved us when you could have left us, when maybe you should have left us. Why did you do this? It was the same question Helene had asked in the forest. Jack still didn't have a good answer. My mother, he said slowly. She used to say that how we act when nobody's watching tells us who we really are, I guess. I needed to know I was still the kind of person who helps people, even if it's stupid, even if it costs something. It is not stupid, Liese said fiercely. It is the only thing that is not stupid in all of this. Helene stirred, her eyes opening halfway. Jack? She murmured, the morphine making her voice thick. I'm here. Marta? Still in surgery. Captain Hayes is a good doctor. If anyone can save her, he can. Helene nodded slightly. I must tell you something. While I still can, while I have courage, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She struggled to sit up. Liese helped her, propping pillows behind her back. You asked why we were in the forest. Liese told you about the refugees. But there is more. Marta's husband. He was Wehrmacht, infantry. He was killed at the Bulge in December. When Marta heard, Helene's voice broke. She wanted to die too. She had a baby 2 months old, but she did not care. The grief was too big. Jack waited, sensing there was more. The baby, Helene continued. She died 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia. No medicine, no doctors, just died. Since then, Marta has been like a ghost. I thought bringing her with us, leaving the village, might give her a reason to keep living. But I think part of her wants to die, wants to be with her husband and baby. The weight of that knowledge settled on Jack like snow piling up on a roof. He'd risked his squad, diverted from his mission, possibly doomed other wounded soldiers, all to save a woman who might not want to be saved. That doesn't matter, he said finally. It's not up to us to decide if her life is worth saving. We save it anyway. She can decide later what to do with it. Helene smiled slightly. You are a good man, Jack Turner. The war has not taken that from you. The war's taken plenty, just hasn't gotten around to that yet. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the camp was settling into its night routine, guards changing, generators humming, the distant murmur of men trying to sleep despite their wounds. A medic came through the tent, checking on patients. When he reached Helene's bed, he paused. How's the pain? He asked in German. Helene blinked in surprise, then answered in the same language. The conversation lasted a few minutes. When the medic left, she looked thoughtful. He was a prisoner, she explained to Jack. German-American. His parents immigrated in the 20s. He learned German at home. He says in his camp, there was a German nurse who was kind to the prisoners, who made sure they had medicine even when supplies were short. That was you, Jack guessed. How did you know? Lucky guess. You're the kind of person who'd risk yourself to help people, even enemy prisoners. Helene looked away. I did not think of them as enemies, just as hurt boys, far from home. Like you, like all the soldiers. Did you get in trouble? For helping them? Some. But I was needed. Nurses were scarce, so they looked away, mostly. She touched her ribs gingerly. Until the end, when everything fell apart and suddenly everyone was looking for traitors and collaborators. Then someone remembered. They came to arrest me. That is why I was running with Marta and Liese, not just from the war, from my own people. The complexity of it struck Jack hard. She wasn't just a victim of the war's violence. She was a victim of its hatreds, its need to categorize everyone as loyal or traitor, friend or enemy. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. I would do it again. Those boys I helped, they were just boys. They did not start this war. They did not want to be in it. Neither did you, I think. No, I didn't. Then we are the same. All of us. Caught in something bigger than ourselves, trying to stay human in the middle of it." Before Jack could respond, Captain Hayes entered the tent. His surgical gown was spattered with blood. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes held something that might have been cautious hope. "She's alive," he said without preamble. "Marta Schneider. She made it through surgery. We removed her spleen, repaired a tear in her small intestine, and gave her 4 units of blood. She's critical, but stable. If she makes it through the night, she'll probably make it." The relief was so intense, Jack actually felt dizzy. Liese started crying, quiet tears that shook her shoulders. Helene closed her eyes and whispered something in German that sounded like a prayer. "Thank you," Jack said. "Sir, I know what you said about costs, and I know. Save it, Sergeant. I'm too tired for philosophy. Just, next time you find wounded civilians, maybe call it in first before you drag them across half of Germany." "Yes, sir, I will." Hayes started to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, you probably did the right thing. Stupid, maybe. Risky, definitely. But right. Sometimes those things aren't mutually exclusive." When he was gone, Jack let himself lean back against the pillows. His arm ached. His whole body ached. But under the pain was something lighter, something that felt almost like peace. "She will live," Liese whispered. "Marta will live." "Yeah," Jack said, "she will." And for that moment, in that tent, in the middle of a war that had killed millions and destroyed countless lives, 3 people from opposite sides found common ground in the simple miracle of one life saved. The attack came at dawn. Jack woke to the sound of explosions, not close, but close enough. The tent shook. Someone shouted about enemy artillery. The relative peace of the night shattered into immediate chaos. He rolled out of bed, ignoring the protest from his stitched arm, and grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. Around him, wounded men were trying to get up, to arm themselves, to do something other than lie helpless in their beds. Captain Hayes burst through the tent flap. "We're evacuating. Enemy offensive, 3 miles east and moving fast. SS reconnaissance reported in the area. We've got maybe 2 hours to clear out." "What about the critical patients?" Jack demanded. "We're loading ambulances now, but we don't have enough vehicles. Some people are going to have to walk or be left behind for the next evacuation wave." The implications were clear. Marta, who'd just barely survived surgery, would be in an ambulance. But Helene and Liese, whose injuries were less severe, would have to fend for themselves. "I'll take them," Jack said immediately. Hayes looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You have orders, Sergeant. Your unit is being pulled back to regroup. You're supposed to report to..." "Sir, with respect, I brought these women here. I'm not leaving them now." Noble sentiment. Also, insubordination. "Yes, sir. I know." They stared at each other. Hayes broke first, shaking his head. "You're going to get yourself court-martialed or killed. Probably both." "Probably, sir." "Fine, take them. But you'll need to know the route. There's a fallback position about 8 miles west. Old monastery on a hill. We're consolidating there. Can you make 8 miles with 2 wounded women?" "I can try, sir." Hayes pulled out a map and showed Jack the route. It wasn't straightforward. The direct road was too exposed, likely to be targeted by artillery. Instead, they'd have to go north first, then west through a series of farm tracks and forest paths. "There's one complication," Hayes said. "This route goes near a place called Hohenstein. It's supposed to be abandoned, but we've had reports of SS in the area. Waffen SS, not the regular Wehrmacht. They're fighting a rear-guard action to slow us down. Jack knew about the SS. Everyone knew. They were the true believers, the fanatics who would fight to the last man. They were also the ones least likely to honor surrender, to respect civilians, or to show any mercy. I'll be careful, sir. Careful isn't enough with those people. You'll need to be smart, lucky, and invisible. Hayes handed him the map. Good luck, Sergeant. You're going to need it. Within the hour, the camp was a controlled chaos of evacuation. Ambulances loaded with the most critical patients rolled out first, heading west on the main road. Behind them came trucks carrying supplies, medical equipment, and personnel. Jack found Helene and Liese in the recovery tent, already dressed and ready to move. Helene moved stiffly, her ribs obviously painful, but her face was set with determination. Liese looked terrified but trying to hide it. Marta? Helene asked immediately. In the first ambulance convoy. She'll be at the monastery before we are. Relief crossed Helene's face. And we go how? On foot. 8 miles through back roads. It won't be easy. Nothing is easy, Helene said. We go. Jack led them out of the camp as the last trucks were pulling out. Fletcher found him at the perimeter. Sarge, what the hell are you doing? Lieutenant's looking for you. We're supposed to be loading up. Tell him I'm on a special assignment. Escorting civilians to safety. Fletcher looked at Helene and Liese, then back at Jack. This is crazy. You're throwing away your career for 3 Germans? Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally doing something that'll let me look at myself in a mirror again. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a spare pistol from his belt and handed it to Jack. Take this. And here, he dug into his pack and produced a canteen and 2 ration packs. You'll need these more than I will. Thanks, Ray. Don't thank me. Just don't get killed. I don't want to have to write your mother and explain that you died because you had a hero complex. They shook hands. Then Fletcher was gone, jogging back toward the trucks, and Jack was alone with 2 German women and 8 miles of enemy territory ahead of them. Okay, he said. Let's move. The first 2 miles were almost peaceful. They followed a farm track that wound through snow-covered fields, staying in the tree line where possible. The sky was overcast, which meant no air support but also no enemy planes. The artillery had stopped, which meant either the offensive had stalled or it had moved past the hospital camp. Neither option was comforting. Helene walked steadily despite her injuries, one hand pressed to her ribs. Liese stayed close to her, nervous eyes scanning the landscape. Jack kept them at a steady pace fast enough to cover ground, slow enough that Helene could keep up without collapsing. Around noon, they stopped to rest in an abandoned barn. The roof was half gone, but the walls provided some shelter from the wind. Jack distributed the rations, hard crackers, canned meat, chocolate. They ate in silence, too hungry and too tired for conversation. How much farther? Liese asked. Jack checked the map. Maybe 5 miles. We're making good time. What is this monastery like? I don't know. Never been there. But it's on high ground, defensible. Army wouldn't choose it otherwise. Helene was looking out through a gap in the barn wall, her expression distant. I know this place, she said quietly. This farm. The people who lived here, they had a daughter. She was my friend when we were children, before the war. What happened to them? I don't know. Gone, I suppose, like everyone. She turned back to Jack. Do you think it will ever be normal again? After the war? Jack thought about his hometown in Pennsylvania. About fishing with his father in the creek behind their house. About his mother's garden. About a world where the biggest concern was whether it might rain on Saturday. I think we'll make something new, he said. Maybe not the same as before, but something. People are good at that, building new things from the ruins of old ones. I hope you are right. They rested for 15 minutes, then moved on. The terrain got rougher as they entered a stretch of forest. The path here was barely visible under the snow. Jack had to navigate by compass and instinct, hoping the map was accurate. That's when they heard the engines. Jack froze, holding up a hand. The sound was unmistakable vehicles, multiple ones, moving fast. Coming from the south, heading west on what must be the main road. "Down," he hissed. They dropped into the snow behind a fallen log. Through the trees, maybe 200 yards away, Jack could see the road. A convoy of vehicles appeared, trucks, mostly, with a command car in the lead. They were moving fast, kicking up snow and mud, and they were flying the SS banner. Jack's blood went cold. If the SS was this far west, it meant the offensive was bigger than intelligence had thought. It also meant the route to the monastery might be compromised. The convoy passed. Jack waited 5 minutes after the last vehicle disappeared before letting them move again. "We need to be extra careful now," he said. "Those troops are between us and where we're going." Helene nodded. "There is another way. Through Hohenstein village. It adds distance but avoids the main road. The village is supposed to be in the SS sector. I know. But I also know the village. I know places to hide, ways through that are not on any map. It is a risk. But everything is a risk now." Jack considered it. The direct route was compromised. The detour through Hohenstein was dangerous but might be their only option. "Okay, we go through the village. But if we see any enemy, we hide. We don't fight unless we absolutely have to." They changed direction, moving northeast toward Hohenstein. The village appeared after about a mile, a cluster of stone buildings huddled around a small church. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, which meant someone was still there. As they got closer, Jack could see the damage. Artillery had hit the village at some point. Several buildings were collapsed. The church steeple was gone, leaving a jagged stub, and in the village square, he could see vehicles, the same SS convoy they'd seen on the road. "We can go around," Helene whispered. "Through the ravine behind the village. It's steep, but it will keep us out of sight." They circled wide, staying in the forest. The ravine was exactly as Helene described, a deep cut in the earth with a frozen stream at the bottom. Getting down was treacherous. Getting up the other side was worse, but they managed it, helping each other over the icy rocks. They were almost clear when Liese slipped. She went down hard on her knee, crying out before she could stop herself. The sound echoed in the ravine like a gunshot. Jack froze. Helene grabbed Liese, covering her mouth. They waited, barely breathing. Voices, German voices, coming from above, from the direction of the village. Jack pulled both women into a crevice in the ravine wall, covering them with his body. Through the rocks, he could see figures at the ravine's edge, 3 SS soldiers. Looking down, they were talking, debating whether they'd heard something or if it was just the wind. One of them started to descend into the ravine. Jack's hand went to his pistol. If it came to it, he'd fire. But 3 against 1 at close range, he'd be dead in seconds. And then what would happen to Helene and Liese? The soldier was halfway down when another voice called from above. An officer, by the sound of it, ordering them back. Something about not wasting time on ghosts. The soldier hesitated, then climbed back up. The voices faded. Footsteps crunched away through the snow. They stayed hidden for another 10 minutes before Jack dared to move. When they finally climbed out of the ravine, his legs were shaking. "That was close," Helene breathed. "Too close. We need to move faster. Put distance between us and that village." They pushed on, exhaustion warring with fear. The monastery was still 3 miles away. 3 miles that felt like 30. They reached the monastery as the sun was setting. It rose from the hilltop like a medieval fortress, all stone walls and narrow windows. The American flag flying from its highest tower was the most beautiful thing Jack had ever seen. But between them and safety was a problem. An SS squad had set up a roadblock at the base of the monastery hill. Maybe 8 men, with a machine gun position covering the only road up. Jack studied the situation from the tree line. The monastery was close, so close he could see American soldiers on the walls. But getting past that roadblock without being seen or killed seemed impossible. "There must be another way up," Helene said. "A path. These old monasteries always had secret paths for when they were under siege. Do you know where it is?" "No, but I know where to look. The east side, probably, away from the main gate." They circled around, staying well out of sight of the roadblock. The east side of the hill was steep and rocky, covered in ice. Helene was right, there was a narrow path, barely visible, that zigzagged up the slope. "That's going to be hard to climb," Jack said. "Especially in the dark. Hard is better than impossible. We can do hard." They started up. The path was treacherous, icy rocks that shifted underfoot, exposed roots that caught at their legs. Helene fell twice. The second time, Jack heard her gasp in pain as her injured ribs took the impact. "I'm fine," she said before he could ask. "Keep going." They were maybe halfway up when they heard the shout from below. The SS squad had spotted them. Jack looked down and saw soldiers pointing, starting to move toward the base of the path. In minutes, they'd be climbing up after them. "Move," he shouted. "Fast as you can." They scrambled upward, abandoning caution for speed. Behind them, gunfire erupted, shots pinging off the rocks around them. The Americans in the monastery heard the shooting and returned fire, providing cover. Liese went down, clutching her leg. Jack grabbed her, hauling her up. Blood on the snow, she'd been hit. "I can walk," she gasped. "Just help me." They pushed on, Jack supporting Liese while Helene staggered ahead. The monastery gate was above them now, maybe 50 yards. American soldiers were shouting encouragement, laying down suppressing fire on the SS below. An explosion behind them. Grenade. The concussion knocked Jack forward. His ears rang. Something sharp hit his back. Shrapnel or rock. He couldn't tell. 20 yards. 10. Hands reached down, pulling them up. American voices shouting, "We got them," and "Medic." They tumbled through the monastery gate. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind them. Jack lay on the cobblestones, gasping, aware that Liese was crying and Helene was collapsed beside him and he was bleeding from somewhere. "Sergeant Turner?" Jack looked up into the face of Captain Hayes. The doctor looked haggard, but alive. "Made it," Jack managed. "I see that. You're also shot." "Am I?" "Yes." "Superficial caught your shoulder. But you're bleeding all over my courtyard." "Medic!" They carried him to the monastery's makeshift hospital, a converted chapel where rows of wounded men lay on cots. Hayes himself treated Jack's wound, cleaning it and stitching it with the same practiced efficiency he'd shown before. "Liese?" Jack asked as Hayes worked. "Bullet grazed her calf. Painful but not serious. She'll be fine." "Helene?" "Cracked another rib in the fall, but she's stable. Both women are asking about you, actually. Worried. Which is ironic considering you're the one who dragged them 8 miles through enemy territory." Jack closed his eyes. "Marta? Still alive. Still critical, but alive. Your 3 Germans seem determined to survive, Sergeant. I think they may be too stubborn to die." A laugh bubbled up from Jack's chest, turning into a cough. Everything hurt. But under the pain was relief so profound it felt like warmth spreading through his frozen body. "Get some rest," Hayes said. "You've earned it. And when you wake up, you and I are going to have a conversation about following orders and acceptable risks and military discipline." "Looking forward to it, sir." But he was already falling asleep, exhaustion finally claiming him. Jack woke to find Helene sitting beside his bed. She looked pale and worn, her face showing the toll of the last few days, but her eyes were clear and focused. "You are awake," she said. "Good. I was beginning to worry." "How long?" 12 hours. It is morning now. The offensive has stopped. The SS withdrew during the night. We are safe." Safe. The word felt strange. Jack had spent so long existing in a state of constant danger that safety seemed like a foreign concept. "The others?" "Liese is sleeping." Marta woke briefly. She asked about her baby. Helene's voice grew soft. She does not remember yet that the baby is gone. The morphine. It confuses her. When she remembers again, it will be hard. Jack tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His shoulder screamed in protest. "Easy," Helene said, steadying him. "You are hurt worse than you think. Story of my life." He managed to get upright, leaning back against the wall. "What happens now? To you, I mean. And Liese and Marta?" Helene was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. We are prisoners, I think. or refugees, or something between. Your Captain Hayes says there are camps for displaced persons, places where we can go until the war is over and decisions are made. That's not much. It is more than we had in the forest, more than we would have had if you left us there. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold. Jack Turner, you saved our lives. You risked everything, your mission, your career, your safety. Why? Jack thought about all the answers he could give. The tactical ones, the moral ones, the ones that would make sense to a military tribunal or a chaplain. But sitting here, holding the hand of a woman who'd been his enemy 2 days ago and was now something else, something complicated and human, he found he could only offer the truth. Because I needed to believe that in all this death and destruction, one life could still matter. That one choice to help instead of hurt could make a difference. Maybe it was selfish. Maybe I did it more for me than for you. Selfish, Helene repeated, and smiled. You risked your life for strangers, and you call this selfish. I think. Jack Turner, you do not understand the meaning of the word. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. It was quick, chaste, but it carried a weight of gratitude and affection that made Jack's throat tight. Thank you, she whispered, for reminding me that good men still exist, that even in war, humanity is possible. Before Jack could respond, Liese appeared in the doorway. She was limping slightly but moving under her own power. Her face lit up when she saw Jack was awake. You are better. The doctor said you would be fine, but I was worried. Takes more than a bullet to stop me. How's your leg? It hurts. But I am young. I heal fast. She came and sat on the other side of his bed. Jack, I must tell you something. My family, the Red Cross, they found them. My mother and brother, they are alive. In a camp near Munich. The joy in her voice was infectious. Jack found himself smiling despite the pain. That's wonderful, Liese. Yes. And they say when the war is over, there are programs for refugees to start new lives. Maybe in America. Maybe I could go to school. She looked at him with eyes full of fragile hope. Do you think this is possible? Jack thought about America, about the country he'd left to come fight in this war, about the prejudices and fears that would make accepting German refugees difficult, but also about the fundamental decency he still believed in, the capacity for forgiveness and new beginnings. I think anything's possible, he said. The war won't last forever, and when it's over, people will want to build something better. You could be part of that. Over the next few days, the monastery became a hub of activity as the American forces consolidated and prepared for the next push. The SS offensive had been beaten back. The war was winding down, everyone said, though nobody knew exactly when or how it would end. Jack recovered slowly. Hayes kept him on light duty, which mostly meant doing paperwork and helping organize supplies. It gave him time to think about what came next, his squad, his career, the court-martial that might or might not happen. On the 4th day, his lieutenant showed up. Lieutenant William Porter was a young officer who'd earned his commission in the field. He looked tired, like everyone else, but his eyes were sharp. Sergeant Turner, good to see you alive. Sir, Captain Hayes tells me you disobeyed orders, abandoned your mission, and spent 4 days escorting enemy civilians through active combat zones. Yes, sir, that's accurate. Porter studied him. He also tells me you risked your life repeatedly to save 3 women who would otherwise have died, that you showed initiative, courage, and sound tactical judgment under difficult circumstances. Jack waited. This could go either way. I'm not going to court-martial you, Porter said, but I am going to put you in for a commendation. Bronze Star, probably, with valor. Jack blinked. Sir, I don't understand. It's simple, Turner. You did something stupid that happened to also be brave and decent and right. The Army needs more of that, not less. We've spent so long teaching men how to kill that we've forgotten to remind them why we're fighting in the first place. You remembered. So yeah, you get a medal. Don't let it go to your head. No, sir, I won't. Porter turned to leave, then paused. Those women you saved? One of them is a nurse. She's been helping in our hospital. Saved 2 American soldiers who would have died without her expertise. So maybe your mission wasn't as abandoned as it seemed. Maybe sometimes the right thing to do and the smart thing to do are the same thing. When he was gone, Jack sat with that thought. Maybe Porter was right. Maybe there was no contradiction between following orders and following conscience. Maybe the real discipline was knowing when to do which. 3 weeks later, the war in Europe ended. Jack was in the monastery courtyard when the announcement came over the radio. Germany had surrendered. It was over. The celebration was muted. Too many losses, too much exhaustion. But there was relief, profound and bone deep. They had survived. Jack found Helene in the hospital, tending to a patient's bandages. She looked up when he entered, and he saw the same mix of relief and sadness in her eyes. "It's over," he said. "Yes, I heard." She finished with the bandage and stepped away from the bed. "What happens now? I don't know. For me, eventually I go home. For you, for us, there are the DP camps. Displaced persons. We wait there until someone decides what to do with defeated Germans who helped the enemy." She smiled, but it was tinged with bitterness. "I think it will be a long wait." Jack had been thinking about this. "I could sponsor you, put in a word with the refugee services. It's not much, but it might help." Helene looked at him for a long moment. "You have done so much already, more than anyone could ask. Maybe, but I'd like to see this through. Make sure you and Liese and Marta are okay, that you get a fair chance at whatever comes next. And if we say yes, if we accept your help, does this not create obligations? The only obligation is that you live. That you take this chance we fought so hard to give you and you make something good with it. That's all." Helene's eyes filled with tears. She brushed them away impatiently. "I am not used to kindness without conditions. It is strange to me now. Get used to it. The war's over. Maybe kindness can be normal again." They stood together in the quiet hospital, surrounded by the wounded and the healing, the broken and the mending. Outside, somewhere, people were celebrating, but in here, the work of recovery continued, slower, harder, but real. A week later, Jack said goodbye. His unit was shipping out, heading back toward the Rhine and eventually home. The women were being transferred to a DP camp near Frankfurt, where they would be processed, documented, given new papers. Marta had recovered enough to travel, though she was still weak. She thanked Jack quietly, her eyes haunted, but no longer entirely hopeless. Liese hugged him fiercely, making him promise to write. Helene walked him to the monastery gate. "I will not forget," she said. "What you did, what you risked, who you were when you did not have to be. I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd done anything else. Then you are a rare man, Jack Turner. The world needs more like you." They shook hands, formal, proper, insufficient, for what they'd been through together, but also right, somehow. A closing of this chapter. "Good luck," Jack said, "and to you. I hope your home is still there, waiting for you. I hope it is everything you remember." He left her standing in the gateway of the ancient monastery, a survivor among the ruins, and walked away toward whatever came next. Epilogue 1946. The letter arrived at Jack's family farm in Pennsylvania in early spring. His mother brought it to him while he was fixing the fence in the back pasture, the same fence he'd worked on as a boy, a lifetime ago. The handwriting was careful, the English slightly formal. "Dear Jack, I am writing from a small town in New York State. They have given me a job at the hospital here, working as a nurse again. It is strange to be in America, but good. Strange and good. Liese is in school. She sends her regards and wants you to know she is studying to be a teacher. She still talks about the forest and the monastery. She says she wants to teach children about kindness in difficult times. Marta is with her family in Oregon. She wrote to me last month. She is working in a bakery. She says the work helps. She remembers her husband and baby, But the grief is less sharp now. She is learning to live again. I wanted you to know we are well, that your decision to say you are coming with me saved more than our lives. It saved our futures. It gave us a chance to be more than victims of war. There is a saying in German, Wer einen Menschen rettet, rettet die ganze Welt. Who saves one life, saves the whole world. You saved 3. Think of all the world you have saved. With gratitude and affection, Helene Richter. Jack read the letter twice, standing in the spring sunlight with dirt under his nails and the smell of new grass all around. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket, next to his heart, and went back to mending the fence. The war was over. The world was healing. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, he allowed himself to believe that the choices he'd made in that frozen forest had mattered, that they still mattered, that they always would.